from the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador. I'm Carla Gonzalez, and this is From the South. A national strike has been called in Colombia after yet another social leader who was murdered. Silvia Maritza Ramirez Chaverra was the president of the Community Action Board on the municipality of Aguas Claras. The circumstances surrounding her death are still unknown. Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro has said he is open to dialogue after the attempted coup against his government on Wednesday. While addressing the Supreme Court on Thursday, he also announced that the Venezuelan embassy in the U.S. will close. This was in response to what Maduro described as constant attacks on his country by the Trump administration, which is backing opposition member Juan Guaidó, who swore himself in as interim president. The U.S. State Department has ordered non-essential diplomatic staff to leave Venezuela. That's according to the website for the U.S. Embassy in the country. However, the statement stressed that Washington does not intend to close its embassy in Caracas, despite Maduro's calls for them to do so. They state that it is for security reasons. The U.S. has requested that the UN Security Council hold an extraordinary meeting on Venezuela this Saturday. The Trump administration wants to put pressure on other nations to recognize Guaidó as Venezuela's president. It is expected that the U.S. will also ask for new sanctions against President Maduro's government. A protester interrupted U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo during a meeting of the Organization of American States in Washington. The protester from the NGO Code Pink accused the U.S. and its allies of supporting a coup in Venezuela. Several countries' representatives clapped in support. Pompeo was urging Latin American countries to support the opposition. The Secretary General of the OAS, Luis Almagro, failed to get the consensus to recognize Guaidó as Venezuela's president, since most of the member states at the OAS support the democratically elected government of Maduro.
This session is aimed at interfering in the domestic issues of Venezuela, something that goes against this organization, its nature and principles. This room has been transformed into a center for conspiracy against the sovereign nations of Latin America and the Caribbean.
The Russian foreign minister says the fact that a number of countries in America are recognizing a self-proclaimed president in Venezuela is evidence of their direct involvement in the attempted coup. Speaking at a news conference in Algeria, Sergei Lavrov said the United States is paranoid about outside interference in its own elections, but has no trouble interfering in the internal affairs of other states.
I would say that it's another grave interference in the internal affairs of a sovereign state. As you know, there has been more than one attempt to remove Nicolás Maduro from power, including through his physical elimination.
On Thursday, CARICOM heads of government reaffirmed the bloc's guiding principles of non-interference and non-intervention in the affairs of the states. In an official statement, CARICOM countries said the political crisis in Venezuela has been worsened by recent events and can only be resolved through meaningful dialogue and diplomacy. CARICOM leaders are now seeking an urgent meeting with the United Nations to request the UN's assistance in resolving the situation in Venezuela.
Such as health and education through the free movement regime.
And Cuba's foreign minister has called U.S. actions in Venezuela irresponsible, and they have rejected intervention. Foreign Minister Bruno Rodriguez sent his support to Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro and said that the U.S. behavior is violating international law. Rodriguez says those actions pose a threat to peace and stability in the entire region. Some U.S. lawmakers have broken their silence on their government's intervention attempts. U.S. Congresswoman Ilhan Omar has said that a U.S.-backed coup in Venezuela will incite violence and destabilize the region. Congressman Ro Khanna has called U.S. actions as hypocritical. And another U.S. Congresswoman, Tulsi Gabbard, said the people of Venezuela should decide their own future. In New York, people gathered in front of the Venezuelan consulate to reject intervention attempts by the U.S. government. Chanting and holding banners, supporters of President Nicolás Maduro rallied to show their support and shouted, "Hands off Venezuela," to U.S. President Donald Trump.
When do we want it? Now! What do we want? USA! When do we want it? Now! What do we want? USA! When do we want it?
A group of Haitians also sent a message to Venezuela and President Maduro.
Viva Venezuela! Viva Venezuela! Viva Chávez! Viva Chávez! Viva Maduro! Viva Maduro! Viva Haití! Viva Haití! Nous vamos a ir la batalla, nous vamos forcer de Buasaseo, nous vamos a ir la batalla, victoire finale c'est pour Bebo, nous vamos a ir la batalla, nous vamos forcer de Buasaseo, nous vamos a ir la batalla, victoire finale c'est pour Bebo.
A high-ranking member of Palestine Liberation Organization has denounced Washington's support for Venezuela's opposition member Juan Guaidó. The PLO says the move shows that Donald Trump does not care about human rights or democracy. The organization also expressed solidarity with President Maduro. The former president of Ecuador, Rafael Correa, also rejected the U.S. intervention and coup attempts against Maduro's government.
What is happening in the world is unprecedented. Ignoring the constitutional laws, democratic elections, and procedures, some guy by the name Juan Guaidó declares himself as president and is recognized by the 11 Latin American countries and the United States, which had already declared its intention to carry out a coup against Venezuela. Can you imagine that if tomorrow the United States doesn't like some other government, they unilaterally proclaim a temporary president and the whole world must now recognize him, including the OAS? It is ridiculous and unbelievable. We must resist. It is a terrible attack. We used to call it the conservative reconstruction, but now we can call it a new Condor plan. They don't use military forces, murders, forced disappearances, because they don't need that anymore, but we should not exclude those possible measures if they require them.
The Latin American Council of Social Sciences, CLACSO, is calling for a peaceful and democratic solution to the situation in Venezuela. The organization is expressing deep concern about the escalation of violence. It says foreign intervention and sanctions will only deepen tensions. What is needed, according to CLACSO, is democratic dialogue based on respect for human rights. So let's take a look to countries' positions all over the world on Venezuela. As we can see in a map, only 13 countries have refused to recognize Nicolás Maduro as president, led by the United States. Meanwhile, 186 countries are supporting Maduro after winning the elections for his second term. Now to the U.S., where the longest government shutdown in the country's history continues, with no end in sight. Our correspondent, Alina Duarte, has the latest.
While showing great interest in Venezuelan affairs, the U.S. government is facing its own crisis. It's now entered day 35 of a shutdown. Some furloughed federal workers have already been evicted from their homes due to unpaid rents or mortgages. Some have also had to decide between paying their medical treatment or having a decent meal. The two proposals voted on Thursday in the Senate, one from Trump and another from the Democrats, both failed to get enough votes to open federal agencies. This has directly affected almost 800,000 federal workers and indirectly tens of thousands more. Trump wants $5.7 billion for the wall at the southern border in exchange for extending protection for dreamers and people with temporary protection status for 3 years. The Democratic proposal would have opened the government for 3 weeks. This government shutdown is the longest in the U.S. history. Meanwhile, Donald Trump has agreed, following a request from Democratic leader Nancy Pelosi, to postpone his State of the Union address until after the crisis is resolved.
Alina Duarte from the U.S. Roger Stone, a key ally of Donald Trump, is set to appear in court on charges of obstruction of justice, witness tampering, and making false statements. The FBI arrested Stone on Friday following an indictment by a federal grand jury. The charges were brought by Special Counsel Robert Mueller, who is investigating Russia's interference in the 2016 U.S. election and any ties to the Trump campaign.
Serious abuse of power.
It turns out Caribbean carnivals are not just about custom bodies swaying to the beat. The celebrations are also powerful forms of creative activism. In Trinidad and Tobago, popular mass band The Lost Tribe has launched a social campaign around inclusivity and body positivity. The hashtag #MyCarnival, this campaign has created a social media platform for masqueraders of all races and ethnicities, gender identities, shapes and sizes to tell their unique carnival stories. The band also has body-positive makeup artists and stylists. The Lost Tribe was one of the only bands to feature a plus-size model for its band launch. With that, we'll take a short break. Don't go away.
The Pakistani journalist Tariq Ali examines the mass media influence promoted by imperialism. Get access to the analysis of the socio-economic and political life of the whole South America on our screen and platform in English. A critical place committed to the truth to determine the major events that transform the world today. Mondays, only on Telesur.
Welcome back. Press TV anchor Marcia Hashemi has spoken out after being released from a U.S. jail. The Iranian-American journalist spent 11 days behind bars without being charged. Marcia says she condemns illegal detentions of blacks and Muslims by the FBI and that the issue goes far beyond her case.
I condemn the situation in the United States that individuals can be detained, arrested without charge. I understand that there's a global demonstration that was already scheduled in conjunction with getting me released. My request is that these demonstrations continue, that we definitely have them, because it is not about Marcia Hashemi. It is not about me. It is important to know that this can happen to any person at any time in the United States, these illegal detentions, though they may call it legal.
6 days after a pipeline explosion in Mexico, the death toll has risen to 100. According to Mexican Social Security Institute, 4 injured people died early Thursday. The institute said that there are another 11 people still hospitalized. The illegal gas pipeline tap exploded in the Mexican state of Hidalgo. The Caribbean has been put in an alert for dengue fever. Countries across the region are launching public awareness campaigns to help prevent a major outbreak in the tourism-dependent islands. We have more in a report from our correspondent, Alison Kentish.
Health officials in St. Lucia are leaving nothing to chance after CARFA urged the Caribbean region to prepare for the possibility of a severe outbreak of dengue. Dengue is a flu-like illness with symptoms that include fever, joint pains, and headaches. It is spread by the Aedes aegypti mosquito, and the best defense against the virus is to destroy the mosquito's breeding sites. St. Lucia recorded a slight increase in dengue cases towards the end of 2018, but the country's national epidemiologist says this was in keeping with annual trends, as the virus is seasonal and often coincides with the rainy season. She says, however, that an out-of-season outbreak is possible.
With the changes, climate change, it would not be out of character to see cases or increases in cases at periods outside of this traditional timing. This is largely due to the fact that when it rains, water collects in any receptacle, which, however small, that persons may have in their yards. Simple things such as bottle covers, water can collect in that, facilitating breeding of the mosquito.
The last major outbreak of dengue in the Caribbean was in 2009. CARFA has called on health ministries across the Caribbean to increase health promotion and ensure communities have access to information about eliminating mosquito breeding sites. And it seems as though citizens are taking the regional health agency's alerts seriously.
One ought to approach it as a mosquito problem. So we're talking about preparing for the onslaught of upturning receptacles that may hold water, not only around on the periphery of our boundaries or our space, but obviously if we clean our yard and our next door neighbor's yard is unclean and has receptacle which can hold water, then we have a problem. It is actually a nationwide problem.
Well, what we have to do is to keep our surroundings clean and then take care of ourselves, and then the mosquitoes will have to give us a break.
The Caribbean Public Health Agency has recommended a two-pronged approach to tackling the mosquito problem in the region. The first involves managing water storage containers, and the second is the proper disposal of used tires. Local health officials say they want communities to clean up. Alison Kentish, Telesur, St. Lucia.
During his first Mass in Panama, Pope Francis said he doesn't think the Catholic Church needs to be decorative or cool to attract new followers. His comments come as the Church continues to lose influence in the face of the advance of evangelical groups. On several occasions, Pope Francis has discussed the need to make changes in the Church while staying away from controversial issues like gay marriage, abortion, euthanasia, and allowing women to be priests.
We want to go forward, not to create a parallel church that's more fun or cool, in an event with young people with some decorative element, as if that leaves you happy. You don't think that, because to think that will mean to reason, because to think that will mean to disrespect you, and the spirit that lives within you.
Brazil's new president faces a political situation marked by corruption complaints against his family, the dismantling of social protection, and the absence of measures to fight unemployment and poverty. Here's a closer look at that.
Even though Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro hasn't reached a month in office, concerns over alleged political corruption are emerging about his oldest son, Senator Flavio Bolsonaro. He's been linked to investigations into bank transfers and money laundering that also involve the First Lady and a former employee.
The specific case of his son and his family was restricted in formal and institutional terms in Rio de Janeiro, but it took on a national dimension because the son of the President of the Republic was involved. The son of the President asked for a favor from people inside the government to move the case to Brasilia, and when it came back that the investigations would be suspended, it nationalized the issue in political terms.
Bolsonaro has also been criticized because his agenda does not include plans to eradicate unemployment or actions to reduce the high percentage of poor, the school dropout rate, social inequality, or guarantee of proper housing and basic sanitation services.
The truth is that we are dealing with a government that is trying to implement measures to dismantle social protection structures with a liberal agenda in economic terms. But it has not demonstrated the ability to implement these measures. You do not see in the Congress a certainty that this government will be able to carry out its economic measures, whatever they may be. And above that, there is not total clarity.
Brazilian society fears the deepening of the short-term conflicts, especially within groups excluded from government action.
I think these will be difficult times mainly because it won't just be physical, it will be also on social networks. New torture methods will be implemented that are not only damaging to the body, but also to the mind.
During his electoral campaign, Bolsonaro promised that his government would be free of corruption. But investigations of unusual payments that tarnish his family's reputation may, according to analysts, change the minds of his supporters.
Every January, Bolivians buy miniature items that they wish the gods will grant them as part of the annual festival of Alacitas. The square in front of the San Francisco Basilica in La Paz is bursting with people who bring a tiny version of goods to be blessed by the priest. They are also presented to the indigenous Aymara god of abundance, Ekeko, to turn their desires for the new year into reality. We'll be back with more news, so stay with us.
Acompañamos a los pueblos que resisten en cada una de sus luchas.
Somos esa ventana que se abre para visibilizarlos entre fronteras.
Thursdays, only on Telesur.
Welcome back. At least one person is confirmed dead after a series of explosions at a high-rise residential complex in China. A car exploded at an underground garage at the apartment building in the city of Changchun. Several minutes later, there was another blast on the 30th floor of the same building, which also houses a shopping mall. Several people were injured and police are investigating the incident. One person has been reported dead as protests continue in Sudan. Demonstrations raged across Sudanese cities on Thursday, in the most widespread rallies since the anti-government unrest began last month. The protester that was killed was a 24-year-old man in Omdurman, a city across the Nile from the capital, Khartoum. Since December 19, 29 people have died in the unrest. Experts fear sharks and rays species in Liberia's territorial waters are going extinct. They are reportedly being placed on the International Union for Conservation of Nature's Red List, and Liberia is now attempting to save the species from extinction. Sharks and rays are on high demand locally in East and Southeast Asia, so plans to protect the animals have been met with resistance from fishermen who see the catch as a vital source of income.
We have the giant devil ray, and then we have the great hammerhead sharks. These are species that are on the red list of the IUCN. So, we begin very concerned, and then a lot of recommendations were made to the government. The government, through NAFA, they made some, good commitments that EGF should be able to prepare a national plan of action for sharks and ray in Liberia.
Peace talks to end chronic violence in the Central African Republic began Thursday. Government representatives and 14 armed groups attended the meeting held in Khartoum. It's the 8th attempt at peace in almost 6 years. Since 2013, thousands have been killed and a quarter of the country's population have fled their homes.
It is imperative to make 2019 the year of peace in the Central African Republic. Success of the African Initiative for Peace and Reconciliation, and that of a new and vibrant chapter of the history of this broader country.
A gay Moroccan man says he fears for his life after images of his New Year's Eve arrest went viral. Moroccan law states that unlawful or unnatural acts with an individual of the same sex constitutes a crime. And when police took Chakif Flafrid into custody last night, following a minor traffic accident, he was wearing a dress and a wig. Witnesses took videos and pictures of the arrest, and they were soon all over the internet. Now, after being mistreated by police and attacked online, he says he wants to leave the country since he fears for his safety.
My life changed. Before I went out normally, I lived my life quietly. I went for a coffee, I did my shopping. Today, I cannot do that anymore because people insult me in the street since all my personal documents were disclosed on the internet.
The Democratic Republic of Congo's Ebola outbreak has spread southwards into an area with high security risks. The World Health Organization on Friday said there have been 5 cases in Cayena, which lies between the main outbreak zone and the major city of Goma, which is close to the Rwandan border. This has been the DRC's worst outbreak, killing more than 400 of the 700 people believed to have been caught in the disease.
The Ministry of Health and WHO and partners have continued to face challenges in the containment and control of the Ebola virus disease in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. The number of reported cases increased during recent weeks, most notably from 2 new health zones, Katwa Health Zone, where response teams have faced pockets of community mistrust. The outbreak also has extended southwards to Cayena Health Zone, a high